All right, just while everybody else is joining in, we'll get started with the webinar this morning. Good morning and welcome to those that are with us on the webinar this morning to discuss technology in housing associations. We've got a full panel with us this morning, and we're grateful for you joining with us to listen to the vibrant conversation that we'll be talking about today. And yeah, thank you very much. We'll just go around the panelists and do a brief introduction for each one. I'll kick it off. I'm Mike Hooper. I'm the Head of Business Development and Marketing at Knosco. I've been heavily involved in a number of bids and projects within the housing association space. My history prior to this was around IT service management and network management, delivering software services to companies such as Knosco, and I'm very keen to share with you my experiences and my learnings as well. Manju, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, all. I'm Manju. I work for Knosco as the information security consultant. I have roughly 5 years of experience working on the governance, risk, and compliance side. I specialize in ISO 27001 and GDPR especially. So I help clients in implementing and maintaining their 27001 and GDPR. Thank
you, Manju. Arik, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm Arik. I'm the technical project manager for Knosco. I have a 20-year history across the education, public sector, and corporate sectors, working with loads of different customers across these different areas on projects from cloud through just normal transitional work, through digital transformation, and whatever you want to call it these days. So yeah, I've a long history with that, and I work obviously very closely with people like John.
Thank you, Arik. And finally, last but not least, John, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. My name's John Stanton. I'm the head of IT for Thrive Homes. My background is actually in consulting, but I spent 3 months at Thrive helping them sort out their internal IT, and we got on so well that I moved in just over 3 years ago as a permanent employee, and I haven't looked back since. Although it's a very different environment, the public sector, there's a lot of passion there, and I really appreciate that.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. That's much appreciated. Just a bit of housekeeping and introduction to the conversation topics today. This is purely discussion based. There will not be any presentations. I'm sure you'll be glad to hear that. And those that are in attendance today, please feel free to pop any questions that you've got as we go through the discussion in the Q&A chat or chat box. And I'll put them to the panelists as we go through. So please feel free to put whatever comes to mind as we go through this. The hot topics for today, we picked out several. We may not get through all of them, but we'll certainly give it a go. The first topic will be around working from home. Then we'll have a discussion around security, focusing on cyber as well as information security. And then looking at how do we use data to drive better insights for housing associations, and part of that will also form how the evolution of technology and data is being used to enhance the tenant experience. And if we've got some time, then maybe we'll get into the more futuristic evolutions of technology within the housing association space, and maybe we'll talk about some things around quantum computing if we've got some time as well. So what we'll do is we'll go first of all into the working from home. Some of the research that was done by the marketing team here at Knosco, and thank you to Paige who set this session up. We identified that actually there were about 79% of housing association employees who are actually satisfied with working from home. And many of those continue to want to do so. And I know that here at Knosco, we've been working remotely as well since March last year, as a lot of organisations have, with much success. Very much minimal impact to productivity, but obviously there are a number of things that are both technically, from a health and safety perspective and from a mental health perspective as well, which have caused a lot of impact to working from home for users. So we will explore some of that in the conversation today. But just to kick things off, John, I'm going to come to you first. In true tradition, would you please just share some insights around what Thrive are currently doing to support working from home, and what impact you've seen to the user community from that over the last 12 to 18 months as you've looked to implement that?
Well, I think, to be quite honest, Thrive was in a very strong position. It was basically a case of the CEO, sorry, the first lockdown, the CEO just before it, just asked everybody just to take their headsets home and not come back for the foreseeable future. We were very lucky. The hard work and time and effort in advance made sure that the Thrive employees could just work from anywhere. It wasn't just from home. We can work from anywhere. We had all the tools for the job. There was some slight tweaks to be made for certain people who had to work from the office or appear to be working from the office due to firewall rules and things like that. But otherwise, Thrive thrived through it. There are obviously a few people that are having issues, and that's people living in bedsits. Children have been an issue for a lot of people. Home working and mixing education of your children is a big challenge, and keeping them entertained so that you can actually get some time to go to meetings and do some work. But Thrive on the whole hasn't had a major impact. I do realise that going forwards, working from the office for everybody, not just Thrive and housing associations, that's going to change. I'm certainly hearing a lot of whispers that Thrive's going to be a lot more flexible about where an employee is based, and that's a good thing. And that's because we've proved through the lockdowns, productivity hasn't dropped. If anything, it's increased because the workload's been higher, and we've worked through it, done really well.
But have you seen an impact to the mental health and well-being of your users because that productivity hasn't dropped? I know that some of my team, specifically, I can't talk for the rest of Knosco, but I know that quite a few of the teams here have been working some quite exhaustive hours. I know, Eric, you've got a few guys in your project team who have delivered a large amount of projects to enable remote working, but also to enable more in other technology solutions which are now allowing us to work from home, but that's chewing into the time that we would spend traveling to work, whether it's traveling on the tube to go and read a book or whether or not it's just listening to the radio in the car on the way into the office. That time's not available for us now. Have you seen from the Thrive users, John, an impact to their mental and
I have. So I think there's two parts to your question. One on the productivity stroke hours worked side and one around the mental health. So I'll address the working hours. That has definitely been an issue. I suffered it as well. When your laptop's open and it's there in your home environment, you're too tempted to log on to it. And Thrive has been very, very vocal. The exec team have been very vocal, saying, don't feel you have to put the extra hours in. We understand you've got a home life as well. And that's really helped. And I purposefully have started locking my computer and closing the lid at a certain point of the day and not going back to it. It can wait till the morning. If someone calls me, that's a different matter. IT being IT, you get calls. On the mental health side, there have been issues. We've certainly run a lot more extra sessions because we have a group for mental health where they are talking about mental health, how to cope with lockdown, how to cope with the loneliness and the isolation. And for those that have really needed it, we've opened the office. People can come in. There are even through the lockdowns, there are very strict rules and regulations around hygiene and PPE. But for those that absolutely need to get out of their home environment, we've enabled that and we've given them people to talk to. And I personally have spoken to a lot of people and just left the door open and they've called me just for a chat. And Thrive itself has said, if you just want to have a chit chat, don't feel that you can't. Because that's contributing to the work as well. Not just productivity, but your own mental state of mind. People are social animals. Socialise the best way you can. And if that's just having a Teams call and having a chit chat, that's great. One of the things I did for my team straight away was twice a week was to set up not a team meeting, but a team call. So we'd have Teams open for several hours twice a week and we'd just work away and just chit chat like we were in the office. And the number of synergies that you realise you get from that, just from batting ideas back and forth, that you miss when you're on your own. we can get issues resolved in 5 minutes that otherwise might have taken days and days and emails and phone calls. That little bit of chit chat, and it opens up that social aspect as well.
It is an incredibly important aspect, and we can always get hung up on how to use technology to facilitate the working from home and the benefits to the business of working from home, but actually the users are always one of the most important aspects of it, and ensuring that we don't impact the users, and you've put your users through quite a lot in the last 12 months with the working from home. You also migrated to a new MSP as well.
Oh, don't.
So
the telephony.
Yeah, so these things are all to be considered. And Eric, you're experienced in delivering these capabilities to not only Thrive, but other housing associations and more broadly organise our clients as well. Have you got any suggestions and recommendations that could be considered from both a technology and a process standpoint to facilitate working from home, but also enhance the user experience and make it easier for them to be able to work from home?
No, I think, and very much what John said, I think it's finding the right combination of technology and policy to support that. I mean, a lot of businesses pre-COVID were very, very resistant to remote working. It's a surprising number of businesses that have been against it, that they've had to, obviously been forced into doing a complete 180 on these things. And what a lot of businesses have learned is that actually that there can be more productivity that comes from it. But I don't think anyone was ready for full-time remote working. Even people that I suppose like yourself and myself, Mike, that essentially have histories of remote working. One of the keys was having that hybrid of both, and that's kind of been taken away from us to a degree, at least briefly. So it's challenged a lot of the use of technology, and as you said earlier on, from my team's perspective, delivering these projects, whilst we've been working with customers for years on how to do remote working, how to incorporate that in, having such a rush of them at such a short space of time, it's forced people's hands on stuff that's been long overdue. In terms of actual technology, obviously, without going into specifics of things like do you use remote desktop versus VPN, it's ultimately using the right tool for the right job. Guaranteeing that people have access to stuff they need in a secure way, which I'm sure Manju will pick up on shortly. It's guaranteeing security, and more than just the fact of are they logging in with the username password is 2FA enabled. It's just general awareness, because the working environment is different, and again the mental health thing comes into this play of just your space. This intrusion in your space, even if you're used to working from home, this is a drastic intrusion on your space. And so supporting users through that, through policies, through things like that John has mentioned. And we have a similar process where at least once a week we have for a couple of hours near the end of the day, we open up our teams and people just continue working, have a quick chat. And I think a lot of businesses have kind of come to the same solutions, but we're presented with the same problem. No, I think I think overall, I think it's been a positive thing for businesses to have this challenge and having the right tools available. This is decimals and things aside, this is the best time for something like this to happen in the world, because the technology is finally there for it. If this happened 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, technology wasn't ready to support users in this way.
It's interesting you say that. I've been a remote worker for 7 years now.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I joined Konosko is so I didn't have to work from home.
Exactly.
And within a month of starting, I'm back working from home again. So it's been an interesting time. And I think for me, about how do we make this enable users to cope over a longer period of time with the working from home thing is going to be really important. Definitely. I think, John, some of the things you touched upon are really great pointers about how to ensure that users are able to use working from home as for a much longer period of time and see that this is something that's going to be here to stay. Eric, you touched on something that actually I wanted to cover off, which is around security. And Manju, I'd like to just come to you just to talk a little bit around the considerations and the implications of working from home, specifically on information security, because obviously that's something that's probably a lot of the front of mind of senior execs and IT directors and heads of IT across not only housing associations, but more broadly. What are the key things that you are thinking about when we talk about information security in working from home?
Initially, the workforce was working from office, so the office network was secured, you had everything there. But when you start moving from home, people are starting to use their own Wi-Fi. If they're using their own Wi-Fi, are they connecting to a secured VPN? Is the VPN secured enough? 2FA enabled? Are they aware that they have to log into their VPN every day when they connect the system? And all those stuff is there. With the stress of staying at home, having kids, managing their schooling and work, sometimes they don't realize that they have not logged into their VPN. Sometimes your entire data is on the public network, what you use and stuff. So at the end of the day, it's all about human firewall. That's what we say. It's like keeping people aware and educating them regularly, sending out tidbits or some news about them. You need to secure this. This is your password policy. Sending them reminders in a very subtle way so that they don't get overwhelmed about information security has become like something they don't want to follow. Like if you force something on them, they want to break it and go. So in a subtle way, in a subtle manner, if they are kept on constantly reminding about the importance of it, then it'll become a habit for them. So whenever they log in, they'll try to do, okay, I need to log in this, then the VPN, then my company is secured and all those stuff. So it's a fine balance between enforcing and reminding them. So I would stress on awareness and education for the staff. In any given instance, does the staff know what needs to be done? In case if they've clicked on a phishing email, do they know who they need to contact in the organization next? So that awareness is very important. If that is done, no matter whatever happens, you could always secure your network, your information security, your data, everything will be secured enough. So that's what I would stress on, keeping your staff aware of any given situation. What needs to be done is the most important thing that needs to be done. No matter what controls you implement in your system, the awareness is what comes at the top.
Thank you, Manju. I think it's going to bring us nicely onto the next topic of conversation around security, and you've raised some good points there. John and Erica, is there anything else that you would like to add to what Manju's just talked about there?
I would just like to say and back up what Manju said about people. They're the weakest link, and you can't bombard them with reminders, or it becomes noise and they ignore it. You've got to work with them, talk to them, spend some time with them, encourage them. If I'm prepared to spend time with them, walking through it one-on-one, if they've got an example phishing email or something like that, and I actually spend some time with them, they understand the importance of it because I'm spending some of my valuable time, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Excellent. Well, let's move the conversation on a little bit into specifically around security. And I know that in our briefings before this panelist discussion, we did talk about several housing associations in the space who have fallen victim, unfortunately, to cybersecurity attacks and issues and breaches since over the last 12 months, and that's not uncommon. We've seen that across our client base and more generally across the IT industry, as we've seen an increase in the amount of attacks from various things such as ransomware and phishing emails, which you just called out, John. And we did a security panel discussion back in November with Pool Reinsurance. And I just wanted to come back to some of the stats that we pulled out in that panelist discussion, just to kind of make a bit of a focal point about the fact that this is something that is now, growing legs and arms and is starting to become a more prevalent concern. Microsoft's digital defense report in September highlighted that there were 13 billion malicious or suspicious emails created up until September 2020. 1 billion of them had URLs which were set up for phishing specifically. The most common form of attack between October 19 and July 20 was ransomware. And we certainly saw, I think it was around about a 50-60% increase in ransomware attacks during the first lockdown. And I think we need to be reminded that these things are becoming more complex and they're innovative. Attackers are being more innovative in how they do it. There's an estimate out there from the NCSC that actually there are 250,000 new malicious programs being created every single day. What are the trends that you're seeing around cyber attacks, specifically on housing associations?
Phishing attacks have definitely increased. The Office 365 stats, before we started with you, Eric, with Konosko, in the first lockdown, I think there were about 500% more blocked. We are very lucky in that the users are quite adept at seeing these types of emails, so we haven't actually fallen for anything. So I know it's a lot more prevalent, but we have so many tools that it's not getting through. Not very often, anyway. I don't know if you've seen anything across your customer base, Manju or Eric.
Most of the times it happens like they send out saying that your salary details, we are changing it to a different bank. It imitates that saying that it comes from your company HR.
Yeah.
So initially it started when the lockdown started, people started panicking. So they started responding to those emails and they started sending them their bank details. That was a common occurrence that happened. That's one thing that we picked up, like they are imitating someone from your own organization because that's freely available on the social networking sites. So they pick up information from there and they try to imitate it. What people don't realize is they don't pay attention to the from email as to which domain it's coming from. Once they see the content, they have the habit of reading the content first and then they start to panic and they reply back.
Agreed, but there are IT tools we can use to help block that. I know we don't get any of those anymore since we've moved to Konosko, and we've really tightened that up. It was very good before, but we were only using Office 365 tools then.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say with that, John. I mean, I think you guys are in a really good position, probably more so than even a lot of our own clients. You'd already made a lot of strides into getting the right tools and aligning things up. We've added more tools to that and improved the existing tools you had, but you were already on a good track.
Yes,
significantly more so than I think a lot of our own existing client base. I think a lot, probably more than other housing associations as well. So there's definitely a lot of lessons to be learned there, and on things that can be done to protect the users and protect the business from such things.
I think I got the gist of where the conversation had gone there, and what I would like to do is just talk a little bit more about, John, you referred to the improvements that you've been making and the things that have changed since you joined Konosko. Can you just talk a little bit more about any of the specifics of what is being done differently to support that, but also around the improvement of the security posture?
My previous incumbent was very good at security, don't get me wrong, they really were, but it's been a breath of fresh air with Konosko on the security side. We've really, really beefed it up. The biggest gain I've seen is moving to Mimecast, which is supplementing the additional security we had from Office 365 itself. But Mimecast is worlds above it. It's up in the clouds compared to Office 365 security. And we've also implemented KnowBefore, which is giving the users training, but we're also doing simulations. So once every quarter, we send out a phishing email and see who responds. And the amount of work we've had to go through just to make sure those phishing emails actually got through all the filters just to get to the users to see if they clicked on it was amazing. It just shows how good the security is. I think for me, the change of provider didn't help much with the SIEM because we stayed on Alien Vault. We went from Alien Vault to Alien Vault, which was very good. But the biggest change, and I think it's quite good for Konosko as well, was we actually integrated Darktrace. And that does the network analysis and anomalies. And we've also bought the anti-Gina modules, which will take action if there are any issues. And although it hasn't triggered, because we've got quite good security and very good users, having that comfort blanket is really important for me. The only other major change was the backups. Moving to Acronis, which is a cloud-based backup system, away from the Azure backups, means we have that strong air gap so that if we get ransomware, it's not going to ransomware the backups. They're not going to get zipped up. And I have that little extra bit of comfort when I put my head on my pillow that I can actually get to sleep now without worrying.
Just as well you turn the laptop off in the evenings as well now, John. So you don't have to worry about being bothered as well. So
until Konosko ring me.
Excellent, good stuff. I know that if Hilton, our CISO, was here, he would certainly talk about security needs to be a layered approach. I think what you've explained there is certainly that. It's not just about doing antivirus or malware. There's a whole load of things to consider to actually ensure that you've got the strongest security posture necessary.
I
But it's
understand
always a
and
journey.
agree. Yeah, it is a journey, and that's something that Konosko are not scared of. He's going on that journey with me. Dark trace integration was a journey that we went on together, and we've got it working well. Even though they've got dark trace in other environments, it's a standalone. But we're also going for a new EDR, which is going to be CrowdStrike, endpoint detection and recovery. And we've been on a journey together with CrowdStrike and Konosko, working out how it's going to work from an MSP point of view. It's a really, really good tool. It's bleeding edge, and it's going to really help keep Thrive secure. But it's not something you can just put into an environment and expect it to work. You need to understand the support process, the support procedures, how the commercial relationship work, and how the account management's going to work. And that's something that I can't praise Konosko enough for. Working together on the new tech and the best bits of software for Thrive and doing it together as a team. That's what I've really appreciated.
Fantastic, and thank you for the kudos there, John. It's always nice to hear those sorts of things being spoken about by our teams, and it's an incredibly important part of what we feel that we bring to our clients as well. And it's great to see that you're receiving that. I can assure the audience that definitely wasn't rehearsed. So thank you, John. Obviously, cybersecurity is one thing, information security is certainly another, and we know that I'm very mindful, I'm not sure if the panelists are as well, about the number of frameworks that are out there to be considered. And if you are considering starting on your journey, where do you start? Which frameworks do you think about doing? Is ISMAS one of them? Is it Cyber Essentials? Is it 27001? What level of security do you need to put in place to adhere to things like GDPR compliance? So, Manju, I'm going to come to you on this one, because I know that obviously you're fairly experienced in this space as well. Are there any recommendations and suggestions that you can make for any organisation and where they are in their journey, whether it's at the start, the middle, or in that more mature end?
A lot of organizations have gone for 27001 because it's a selling point, and it also keeps you in check as to what controls you have. Your risks are identified, you put in essential controls for it. But IASME has come up with the governance framework now, which is similar to 27001, let's say 80% similar to it. So it matches the controls of 27001 there, but it's targeting at small and medium industries who don't want to go through the tedious process of implementing and maintaining 27001. And it also comes at a reasonable price. So ISME is something the government has come up with, or rather the NCSE has come up with. They were initially doing the cyber essentials. Now they've come up with the governance side as well. So that would benefit companies which don't want to go for 27001 or the NIST or any other ISO standards that they want to go. Cyber Essentials targets on the security part, cyber security part, wherein they have basically the 5 things: the patch management, the software, your OS, is it everything updated? Do you do your security patch every 14 days? Is it updated and all those stuff? But they don't check the governance part of it. So governance and cybersecurity is a very good, or rather you need to have a fine balance for both, because checking on the cybersecurity is easy, or I wouldn't say easy. You have tools, you have things, and you have visible results. So for example, if you've implemented any antivirus, it's going to tell you whether everything is running on antivirus. Is there anything popping up? Is there any alarms or anything? Whereas governance doesn't show you any visible results like numbers, but it helps the organization to grow, and it understands the risk, and it gives you a better control on the total information security side, which includes your cybersecurity as well. So I would say that governance is also required in any organization apart from your cybersecurity side.
Thank you, Manju. Anything else your panelists would like to add to that?
I think for businesses that are small, that don't have a dedicated security team, Cyber Essentials is a really, really good starting point. It makes you think about the things you didn't think of. And it might only be a paper exercise, but if you take it seriously, it will get you a long way to being at least more secure than you were before.
Thank you, John. I think it's interesting because we've talked about working from home and we've talked about obviously cyber and information security here so far, but the key part of this is about data, really, both securing the data, making it usable, making it accessible. And the third topic, which I'm just mindful of the time, which we'll move on to now, is actually about how do we use that data? How do we make better decisions for our business based on the data that's being collected? And I've spent a lot of years in the data warehouse, big data space, data lakes, and it can become a very complex area to be involved in. And I think the key thing here is about how do we enable organizations, and in this example, housing associations, to make better use of the data that they're collecting, both from their tenants, but from the infrastructure they've got, whether that be the buildings, or the properties, the maintenance information, and all these things, and actually bring it together to actually enable better insights. There's a shift that's really coming in terms of how big data analytics is going to be used to facilitate change within social housing, both in the provision of it and also the management. John, when we were talking about this before the webinar today, you were quite vocal about the data and the insights and how you think it's going to be used. How do you see this evolving for housing associations?
I think there's an evolution coming in data. I just want to differentiate between data and information. IT are responsible for the data to make sure it's there and make sure it's safe, make sure it's available at all times in real time, and to make sure it's safe and backed up and can be recovered and the business doesn't lose it. Information is for the business to use from that data, if you see what I mean.
Completely.
But
completely.
The evolution that's coming, and I can see it coming in Thrive now. We are considering changing how we store our data and how our applications work in a big way. And that'll give us the chance to get all our data into one place, no duplicates, no batch processing, everything's real time. And that's going to change the whole way that we view the business and the business takes decisions. And I do understand there's lots of businesses that have disparate systems, but at some point you have to get down to that golden record, and that will tell you what you need to know about that subject and it being accurate. But I can see the example is KPIs. Monthly KPIs are always telling you where you were at that point in time last month. And that's like steering a barge where the nose is going all over the place because you're steering it from the back. The business needs real-time reporting and dashboards so they can set their goals and see how they're tracking towards them and make the incremental changes by steering it from the front, if you see what I mean, the difference. And then it's a small change gets you more closer to your goal instead of massive changes at the back that are swinging the canal boat nose around all over the place. But once we've got the data in a central place where we can actually access it with all the modern tools, and we can put in sentiment analysis, and we can put AI and ML, we can use Power BI to throw up all those insights. We can start bringing in other data sets. So if we go with the Office of National Statistics, if we use, no, it's the Ordnance Survey that uses the UPRN, Universal Property Reference Number, and that gives us a location for all our properties. And if we, for example, put on the weather data on top of that, does that tell us anything about our properties? If we then include the repairs history on those properties with their locations, is that going to highlight postcodes where, for example, where the roofs hardly ever need repairing? And does that turn out because they're in a little valley and they're very sheltered away from the wind, and hence we can put back by 5 years replacing their roofs because we didn't know about it before? But does that also highlight the postcodes on top of the hill where we're going out for 5 years before the roofs get replaced, and we're going out and repairing their roofs every few weeks, where we should actually move the roof replacement forwards by 5 years. Instead of doing it every 30, do it every 25 in those, to save all those additional costs by going out to fix the roofs. And just throwing in all these data sets is going to throw up all sorts of insights that we just didn't know before. They're going to, as soon as the executives and the directors get to see this kind of data and they understand what they can do and manipulate it and how they can throw in extra, they're going to see so much that's going to help the business, help not only save money, but use that money to build more homes, to house families for longer. Because Thrive isn't here for the next 5 years. It's not here to make a profit. It's here to provide homes for families. And the more we do, the more families are homed in a good property. I sound like I'm selling Thrive now, but this is where my passion comes in. Where Thrive's building properties for homes for people. And if we build a new home next year and there's a family somewhere moves into it, and then in 40, 50, 60 years, that someone from that family might drive past that and say, that was my home. I liked living there. That's what would make me feel good. Sorry, I've totally diverted.
No, completely. No, and actually, do you know what? It brings it nicely into what this is really all about, which is actually end user experience, both not only with technology being delivered to the Thrive end users, but actually the tenant's experience and how we can use technology to actually enhance people's lives day to day. And that's ultimately what you're talking about here, is actually, you know, removing worries about whether or not, you know, somebody's got a leaky roof. You know, just gone through a very, very windy storm in the last couple of weeks, and I'm sure there's quite a few roof tiles. And when we see things like IoT coming up time and time again now, the amount of data that's going to be available for you as a housing association to, you know, measure temperature, humidity, and all these types of things within the properties as well, that's going to only improve the services that you're providing, and save money, but also to make sure that the properties that you're providing are safe, secure, and well maintained, and that's ultimately what this is all about, isn't it?
It is, and ensuring the tenants are getting the best experience they can. And you're right, with IoT, that'll help so many different areas, from what you were saying about temperature and humidity, which is around the mold and people getting asthma. We can help with that once we get the data. We can help identify people that are in fuel poverty, that just can't afford to put the heating on, and how we help them with automated heating. There's new products on keeping your heating on that actually saves you money in the long run, because you're not heating a whole house, you're just keeping it warm. There's so much to come, so much. But until you get your data in that state where you can access it in real time in one place and understand that either that it is accurate or you've got the golden record, it's not. It's just not. It's not going to give you everything you need.
I think it's important the way that you actually differentiated between the two, information and data, and how it's used by an organization. And actually, one of the things I was thinking about this morning was it's very different. How you use data is very different to how you manage information. Eric, I just want to come to you around the information aspect, and purely from an IT delivery. Are there any recommendations or trends that you're seeing, both across the industry and also within the housing association organizations that we work with, about how they both store and manage information and data, specifically related to the cloud? Because that seems to be the trend that I'm seeing of where this is all going.
Definitely, I think that the move to the cloud, I mean, there's a variety of reasons why everyone has started that process, and a lot of it's cost saving ultimately, rather than having these really expensive, sort of overly burden-heavy systems that you have to maintain and support and run within your local office. Obviously, there's energy concerns with that as well, and environmental concerns with that as well. It started, I think, as a cost-saving thing. If we throw everything in the cloud, we don't need to worry about it. But I think the the maturity of that over the last decade or so, and John will know more about this than I do in a lot of respects, there's been a lot of work towards consolidation and getting things correct and in the right place, in the right order, rather than just these very disparate systems that a lot of businesses and housing associations have had for decades, where you get a finance system over here, an information system over there, you've got a security system over here, your file servers over here. Actually bringing all that stuff together, not necessarily under a single provider, but having these systems talking to each other and sharing information securely between each other. And initially, it wasn't that secure. Everything was kind of very open, and now we're all a lot more aware, a lot more mature, a lot more, it's a lot more focused on getting it right, keeping the level of accessibility, because that's key. The reason why the security issues came about was because accessibility came first. It has to be open, it has to be available. And then you start realizing how people are going to manipulate that data. They're going to misuse it. They're going to access, people who shouldn't have access to it suddenly get access to it. So now we're kind of not necessarily backtracking, but we're rethinking some of the strategies of, we don't necessarily want to throw everything in a public FTP server. Let's think about how we put it there so the right people have access to it, the right systems have access to it, but still keep that availability and that accessibility. The ability to work on the go. And again, COVID has already thrown this, thrown a spanner in the works here, making sure that people can access data no matter where they are. Which before each organization, the most secure way to access your data is lock it away and no one has access to it. And a lot of businesses did that with the fact, we'll have it in a public cloud, but we'll make sure it's only available from the IP address of our office. Therefore, it's secure. But now you've got people outside the office need to access it. So you're just opening up little bits and pieces here. I think overall, there's a lot more security awareness, a lot more concern about things, but it's not paranoia anymore. I think there was an initial degree of paranoia. We'd rather not have anything in the cloud. Now it's more of an awareness that we do need the cloud. We do need these very data sources. We do need these disparate systems, but let's make them talk together, make it secure, and just keep that accessibility. Accessibility has to be key. We can't reduce people's access to data now. It's more important than ever that we have access to these things everywhere, but we have to keep them secure.
Thank you, Eric. That's brilliant. And I'm just going to go to a couple of questions in the chat box here. One of them, the first one I'm going to put to you, Manju, is specifically around maintaining user hygiene and what recommendations we can make to improve the basic hygiene for users.
User hygiene, you could go with giving them regular training. A lot of companies are having automated training platforms like KnowBe4, so which gives you training on phishing simulations. You could send them every month or every quarter, and you could also increase the difficulty of it so that people know when they get emails outside the organization what they need to do. They also have these lot of videos on what you need to do in case of a password breach, or how do you have to develop a password, what are the length of the password, the 2FA factor, why do you need a 2FA. So all those basic things, if people are aware of it, passwords 2FA, it's a good step first forward because that's easier to understand. So even for your banking app, it will ask you sometimes for a Face ID, or it will ask you that we will send you a passcode to your mobile. So that's a basic security. So people need to be aware that that's something they have to enable first. So that's one thing I would start off with when it comes to educating your staff and employees. The next thing would be on phishing. If those two things are covered, then people will be more aware of any further things that's happening within the organization.
Thank you, Manju. And one final question, and John, I'm going to aim this one at you, sir. Where next for technology and housing associations? What's the next big thing?
I think we've covered it. It's my pet subject, is data. I think we're going to find the data is getting richer and richer and richer. Once we start coming away from the proprietary systems that lock the data away, and we come to more open standards, and we start sharing our data sets and understanding how our businesses work on a huge scale because we're sharing that data, I think we're going to get some insights that are going to really, really rock the world.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. Really appreciate that. And thank you, Manju and Eric, for your time. We're out of time this morning. Thank you very much to everybody that's joined us on the webinar this morning. Really appreciate your time. Hopefully you found it useful as well. We will be sending this out so that you can watch this at your convenience. And if you do have any other questions for any of the panelists, then feel free to come to us, get in contact with us via our website, or drop us an email if you've got those email addresses. Otherwise, you'll be able to funnel those through Paige, who will be emailing you and follow up to this. So, yeah, on behalf of all the panelists, thank you. And on behalf of all the attendees on the webinar, panelists, thank you very much for your time as well. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Take care.